right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm still Brenda. Today I really want to just talk about basically one diagram. This is our latest system performance measures that have been years in the making, but looking at information that we have about homelessness across Lake County. And I'm going to spend some time sort of dipping and diving into these numbers. But I wanted to first start just by doing a good overview of what I'm talking about. So I get paid every day, I'm very thankful, to think about homelessness. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about homeless policy. I think about this system and system change. System change has been an evolution from thinking about how do we get people off the streets and inside to how do we get people into housing. And one of the ways that we really are actually talking about ending homelessness, which some people think is crazy, is the reason that we're talking about that is because we really can end people's experience with homelessness. And you can end people's experience with homelessness without solving the entire poverty, inequalities of the entire world. You can end people's experience with homelessness. And part of how you can do that is by focusing on what that is. So I have made this diagram that thinks about the number of people flowing into our system in Lake County and the people who are leaving our system in Lake County and the people who return. When HUD talks about homelessness, they focus on people who meet the federal definition of homelessness. So common sense definition of homeless is that doubled up people are homeless. But HUD definition of homeless says those people are very precariously housed, maybe not in a great situation. We want to make sure that they're safe, but not meeting the definition of literal homelessness. So when we think about people in homelessness, I'm going to talk about people in this orange square, those people who are living in a shelter or living in a place not meant for human habitation. Could be an abandoned house, could be their car, could be in a tent outside behind some retail development. Those are the people who are in that box. And we talk about when we're talking about solving for 1,764 people who experienced homelessness in Lake County over the course of a year, we're going to think about how do you have more people move more quickly through the system to permanent destinations? And we're going to think about how to keep people out of entering the homeless system in the first place. So let's talk about the people entering the system in Lake County. 1,140 people entered Lake County system in a one-year period. Now, what do we know about them? 70% of them were new. They had no entry into our system for the 20 months prior. 70% of the people were new. Most of the people coming in are not the same old people, right? Most of the people coming in are new. 46% are entering from a housed location, the most common being doubled up. So a lot of the doubled up people are falling into homelessness. That's something we have to think about. 52% are families. It's a little bit higher than our population in general, so we have 52% of the new people coming in are families. So when we think about this, we need to think about prevention and we need to think about diversion. What we know is that once you enter the orange box, things are worse for you. Things are worse for your physical health, your mental health. They're worse for children. Things are worse for your education. I think I have some people in the room who will be nodding. That keeping people in a housed location is better in general. So prevention and diversion is very important. Now, 1,764, what do we know about these people? So we know on average that their length of stay in shelter is 34 days across all shelters in Lake County. And the average, once you include transitional housing, goes up to about 66. This is not far off from the national benchmark of 30 days. So we're not having a lot, on average, a lot of long-time stayers. 48% of people experiencing homelessness over a year are in families. About 15% are chronically homeless, somewhere between 10 and 15%. The chronic homeless, I want to talk about chronic homelessness just for a second. Chronic homeless means that you have a disability and that you've been homeless for a long time. 1 year continuously, or several episodes that add up to a year. So the reason that we talk about ending chronic homelessness is that it takes you a long time to earn chronic homelessness. You aren't chronically homeless on the first day that you become homeless. So when we think about getting ahead of the curve, ending chronic homelessness is a reality that we can accomplish if we focus on getting people into housing and funding services that can keep them there. About 8% are veterans and 13% are youth, 18 to 24. And these are especially subpopulations that are called out in that federal plan in your lab, a specific focus on ending veteran homelessness, youth homelessness, family homelessness, and chronic homelessness. So this is where I want to spend a minute. I hope that I don't lose everybody once I get into this, but this is a map of a homeless service system in the new age of Housing First. You notice that the orange ends right in the middle, and people are getting into permanent housing. So this is about how do we move people from homelessness into housing? How do we do that quickly? We know that nationally, about 25% of people stay in shelter for less than 7 days and self-resolve and don't return. That's the top arrow. People show up in our shelter system. They are having a very short-term crisis. They need crisis housing, and then they're gone. When you sort of come down towards the bottom, you have people who have much higher service needs, and those are the ones who are going to need the most intensive supports to resolve their homelessness. So in Lake County, trying to have a local focus, 1,028 people access shelter and a night of shelter over the course of a year. That's smaller than the larger number, because our larger number included people who sought services at pads, but did not actually spend the night. Our system is about 41% seasonal beds. We have domestic violence beds, we have seasonal beds, we have some overflow beds, and that's what our system is. And again, a 34-day average stay. So this is, on the left, crisis stabilization and housing search support. The other big piece of people in homelessness is the unsheltered homeless. So living on the streets. It's a little bit of an unknown exactly how many we have, but 10% of the people reported an unsheltered location on the night that they showed up for shelter. So where did you stay last night? And they said, I stayed in my car, I stayed in a park, I stayed somewhere. The people who never hit our system are sort of add to the unknown of who else is out there. We're not completely sure. A big enhancement to the system that actually Jim Menzer is going to talk about, the Homeless Coalition's role, and PADS has a huge role in this as well, is our assessment and placement, the coordinated entry system. The coordinated entry system in Lake County is new, so we've been doing it just over a year. The idea is for people who don't self-resolve, getting an assessment on those folks. Over a 1-year period, we did 174 assessments, and 15% scored into the highest acuity category. So these are the people who are the most vulnerable. And those are the folks who really are focused on being appropriate for permanent supportive housing. So we have an evidence-based tool that we implemented in the last year that all homeless people who have been homeless for 7 days should have an assessment. And that's 174 households. Of those, 15% scored a 10 or above on the vulnerability assessment, sort of indicating that they have a lot of things going on: mental health, involvement with criminal justice, using the emergency room for their health care, all kinds of the things that we hear about all the time. So really, this assessment is about getting people matched with the intervention that's going to work for them. So we have rapid rehousing and links to services. We have transitional housing. Those are shorter term supports that will move people into community-based permanent housing. Community-based permanent housing includes subsidized housing. It includes unsubsidized housing. It includes public housing. And then down in the corner, we have our permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is something we're going to talk a lot about today. And once you're in permanent supportive housing in Lake County, we have a 93% success rate. 93% people who enter permanent supportive housing stayed there or exited to a permanent destination. That's compared to 49% for every other housing program. So when you think about the people who are the highest need, the most vulnerable, having a 93% success rate, it's a very strong intervention for those people. It works well for what it does. So I'm going to zoom back out, don't get dizzy. So we have homeless programs that we are now orienting to getting people into housing quickly and funding services to keep them there. So 1,481 people exit homelessness annually. So these are people, this includes the people who stayed in a shelter for 7 days and then reported that they went somewhere permanent. This includes people who went through a program and went somewhere permanent. And then the point of the 1,481 is that, again, you're more likely to get there if you've had an intervention that works. And then when we look at all the people of those 1,000, now I've forgotten the number, of these 1,481, only 108 returned to homelessness over the course of a year. Most of those came, actually I think it was either 1 or 2 people came from permanent supportive housing. Most of those folks came from lighter touch interventions that didn't quite resolve things for them. So my purpose today was to be the data girl and give you an orientation to what we know, not about any one program and how one program works, but how the programs work together and link together to end homelessness for everyone. So as a system, we're starting to get more precise about the questions that we have and what the data says about our answers. We need to think about how to deal with the 70% of new folks coming into the system. We need to think about how 1,481 becomes 2,000. We need to move people through the system quicker and connect them to housing resources faster. And I think that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of today. I think I'm supposed to take questions, John?
Yeah, there's 2 questions from the audience and 2 questions from public officials. So let's first give public officials, do you have any questions for Brenda about the data? Any less boring than that. I swear it's going to be way more interesting.
How do your numbers compare with 5 years ago, for example, when the crash hit?
How do the numbers compare? You know what, there's some good information on our point in time count. Homelessness overall in Lake County is coming down. And we've been 1 year at the strategy of focusing on the most vulnerable, and that seems to be working. Chronic homelessness is significantly down in Lake County as well. So the number of homeless in general is coming down. We did see an increase after a couple years after the economic downturn.
Although I will say that nationally, the numbers during 2006 didn't increase in chronic homelessness. And I mean, they were fairly steady. It was actually people in shorter term homelessness who lost their housing. So it was, the permanent supportive housing was not where you saw the increase in homelessness. You see the loss in that with loss of affordable housing and loss of services. But if you have those matched, people lost housing.
Well, and one other point I wanted to make, and I'm going to get right to your question, was that if you think about affordable housing is crucial to making sure that people aren't doubled up and falling into homelessness. Affordable housing is also crucial to making sure people have places to exit homelessness from. It's a solution on both sides of the orange square. Yeah.
Yes, good morning. My name is Alan. I'm with NAMI. And my question is, aren't we already making a difference? Because we have talked with the, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, okay. Yes, can everyone hear me okay? Good. Are we making a difference already? We at the drop-in center, in our Waukegan drop-in center, we had a guest come and talk with us who is working with the homeless and building houses. but aren't we making progress in that area? Thanks, John.
So yes, I think there are a lot of people in this room who are doing a lot of great work on the issue of homelessness. I think that the focus today is also about what are the larger pieces that we can move to make sure that more of that good work is happening. I think that we are seeing homelessness come down a bit in the community, but there's a concern about those long-term homeless, and are they getting the supports that they need? Are we reaching them? Are they getting access to housing that we know is a strong solution for them? Are there any other questions? Yes.
I guess I'm wondering, how do you prepare? I'm visiting from San Francisco, California. We have about 6,500 homeless, and the programs that they have are a little bit more innovative, because one of the things that they would do is they would have a Project Homeless Connect, where they would have all the service providers come into a room and then provide those services. So that one day they could come and get their driver's license, and then they could go get dental, and then they could go get their wheelchair fixed, and then they could go talk to someone about housing. And it's spreading throughout the country. So that's just one of the innovative things that they're doing. But then they also have teams of people who just go out and bring in homeless and put them directly into housing. So it's getting full and it's harder to get into. And then they just opened up a navigation center where it's different than your program where you just shelter people, where you come in, they connect you to all of the fundings, whether it's SSI or GA, and then they do that. So to me, it's some of the people aren't going to be able to go out and directly work. So I'm wondering, are you going to build a system where people can get connected to those services such as SSI or GA? But I guess I'm just interested as to what are you willing to look outside of Lake County to other states and maybe even countries that are doing things more innovative? The other thing too is that you haven't mentioned the McKinney funding, so that might be another funding stream.
Okay, because I need to make the questions be short, so she's going to go ahead and answer what you got so far, okay?
And I just...
I think when you hear the next speaker on the phone, you're going to hear about that, because certainly they have some innovative programs. So I'm going to give her the mic, and then we're going to answer your question so far.
Yeah, we're just doing a lot of innovative things here that you might not see unless you go research it.
Thank you so much. I think that you had really a good segue for us. Thank you. The question is, how do we build the system so that people can access it? Not how do we help people access the system that we have, but how do we develop a system that will help people access those resources, especially those who have the hardest time doing so. Those are the folks we're most concerned about, and perhaps where we haven't been as successful. I also loved your mention of mainstream benefits and connecting people to the resources that are out there: food stamps, SSI, SSDI, employment where it's appropriate, but also helping connect people to resources. I think we've come a long way in 1 year, in that it was true a year and a half ago that if you wanted to access permanent supportive housing, you had to be on 8 different waiting lists. That's not true anymore. There's one streamlined process. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And especially, I think, to your point, we need to think about those folks going from the street into housing. So I think that that is work that we'll continue to talk about. Thank you. It's a good question. So, so prior to 2 months ago, we didn't have this data. And what I've been doing in the last 2 weeks is saying, all right, so here's how many people experience homelessness. What do we know about them? And digging. So we've done a little bit of a dig into people coming in. We've done a little bit of a dig into people in the orange rectangle. And I think you're right. What's happening for the 108? I just know where they're coming from. They're mostly coming from shelter and exited to a permanent destination and are coming back through. So are we missing another piece there? I don't know. Are they more likely to be families? Are they more likely to have a disability? And those are the next level of questions that we'll continue to work on.